Welcome to my personal study. This room is inspired by the arts and craft movement. We're taking reference from William Morris for the designs. Hi, my name is Aryan. I'm the principal designer for AT&T and I'm the lead designer for this project. When we start a project, I think the most important aspect is the research that you do. Normally I will look at different books on a certain time frame. So go to the library, get books with a little bit more detail about the design philosophies, about the patterns used. I think this deeper understanding before you start any scheme helps to create a very strong design narrative eventually. So the inspiration for this room came from the arts and craft movement, mainly William Morris. So the arts and craft movement started in about 1860. It's the height of the Victorian era, focusing back on handcrafted items, block printing, even things like embroidery, hand weaving, tapestries. So you have a lot of design influences that came from India, that came from China, Africa. So you have this interesting melting pot of handcrafted skills together with like certain patterns and colors that are very international. So it's a very interesting era to kind of reference to. So when I planned this room, I kind of gravitated to William Morris, very famous for fabric design and wallpaper design. It was kind of a collaboration with a couple of artists that brought in this whole new way of designing. William Morris itself and his company, they started to develop a lot of different patterns, and a lot of their inspiration came from nature. So you see a lot of flowers, you see a lot of birds. So I think that's where what I kind of started off with as an overall idea. So when I design a room, I always have three principles that I would like to adhere to. So one is the proportions of the room. Number two is all the materials, the materiality of what we are using in the design. And number three is the story the room tells. Here, when you look at the proportions, this is a typical HDB. It's actually the old master bedroom. The windows are off-center, the room is not imbalanced, and I'm a very symmetrical person. So to emphasize the symmetry in the room, I started actually with the back wall. So to resize the window, just to kind of create a wall, come up with a side wall and create the openings. The other thing that I did is, because the windows are only half height, I placed mirrors below it. So once the light shines through, it just has that idea of full height windows. And because of all the layering I needed for blinds and curtains, those walls came into the room as well. So actually the footprint of the room became a bit smaller, just to, one, bring back a certain symmetry into the place, but also to allow a bit of storage and a little bit of different ways how we lay things out. I don't think a lot of people would think of blocking off windows, and actually I have a window on the side that I completely shut off because I just felt it threw the balance in the room off. I think the first thing when you walk into the room is the desk. It's in a command position of the room. I always wanted to have that kind of like a banker's desk where you just sit behind and you just control the room. In order to find something that suited my needs, I had to design it myself. It was made for me in Indonesia. I went to the factory there and talked to the people. Because I have like exact measurements of like how much walking space do I have on either side, etc. So obviously the size in itself, but also I need to fit in my printer because I'm on an island, so all my stuff needs to be located around me. So when I designed it, next to the overall style and the materials, also the functionality of the desk is something that I kind of put a lot of emphasis in to make sure it worked. The other pieces that we then added on and made myself was like, I wanted to kind of like a bit of a bench idea. So I wanted to kind of like this long ottoman, and then I added on two little side cushions, and it could become a seat if you wanted it to be, or it could be a day bed, or it could be like a place that you can kind of curl up, and sometimes you can take a nap. Fabric-wise, I still kept it with William Morris as a pattern because there were a few patterns that I quite liked, and I just kind of wanted to bring them into the room as well. The room needs to function in a few different ways, so I needed hidden storage, but I'm doing my ironing here, so I needed a place where I can put my iron. So the pedestals, the cabinets in itself, so one actually was made specifically so it can house my iron. So I can just open it up, pull it out, do my ironing and put it away again. So those are the pieces that we worked on with the carpenter, including the side cabinet that we have there. I just wanted to contain some of the porcelain and other heirloom things that I had. So I wanted that to be in my personal space, but I didn't want it to be too cluttered. So when I was 17, I started to plan moving out of my parents' place. I started to buy little things. Actually, one of the first major purchases I made were the antique cabinet that are now here. I bought them when I was about 19, but then on top of the cabinets are little pots. And I bought them when I was about 17, I think. They were like on a sale somewhere. So these have been the pieces that have been following me all around the world. So the wallpaper is actually designed by William Morris' daughter May. She worked together with her father in the company. What drew me to the paper was mostly the colorways. I also wanted a paper that I could have the same pattern for the curtains. Quite unusual to find like wallpaper and curtains that can kind of like match up. So the overall colorway was my main draw to the paper. And when the Morris company reproduced the paper, they kept those imperfections in the paper itself. And I think that charm, and that, although it's obviously a machine printed paper, it still has that feeling of a hand printed paper, which just was the cherry on the cake for me. So one of the new skills I picked up was designing a carpet. I toyed with the ideas before, but I always was in collaboration with other designers, and it was very hard finding something that I felt could fill the space, but also had like the colorways and the patterns that I thought would work for the space. What I did is to design my own carpet. So I started with some of the patterns you find in general arts and crafts designs. I looked a bit at all the William Morris patterns that were there. I sketched a composition of like leaves and flowers, overscaled, because I still wanted it to be contemporary, because a lot of original Morris carpets are a little bit small scale. Transferred it over to the computer and then pick all the colors from the wool samples that match then the wallpaper, so that the colors in the area rug match at some point with what we're using on the walls as well. And then the nice thing by doing things custom is I could scale it properly. So when you open the door, the carpet is a bit higher, so the swing of the door and the carpet is just nice. So those are things like little details which give you the freedom when you start designing things by yourself. When I designed the room, obviously figured out the walls and the flooring and the doors, etc. And then the one area often overlooked is the ceiling. So I wanted to do something a bit more bolder on the ceiling as well. Not so much on color, but more on texture. And I was really drawn to these thin pressed ceiling tiles. So I did a little bit of research and what kind of pattern would work well for the space. Arts and craft would be a little bit more floral, but I felt it became a bit too heavy for the small room that we had. So I picked a pattern that was a little bit more clean lined, a bit more rectangular. And then once I had the sizes of those, that actually determined the whole size of the room, because I pushed the walls inwards as well. So I wanted to create a good balance. So how much perimeter borders I needed around the space, plus the size of the tiles, that eventually dictated the size of the room. And from there I designed the room inwards. So although it was actually one of the last things I picked as a design, it's actually the first thing that determined the entire size of the room. So I think in the room itself there's a lot of architectural detail. I didn't want to do like formal wainscoting and high wood paneling, so I kept the baseboards extremely high but quite low for a wainscoting size. So they're about 35 cm. I think they add a bit of weight to the wall. It also balances the busyness of the pattern. So by having like a tall skirting board, it just kind of like brings the pattern down a little bit. The doors, HDB always has pretty standard sized doors. I wanted to use transoms to kind of like elongate the space itself. Ceiling height is not very high, it's only 2.5 meters. I needed some vertical lines to bring that up. So the architraves around the doors. And then what I did is I mimicked that around the windows as well. So although the windows are quite heavily draped with the curtains, there's still like little woodwork around it that kind of like peeks through as well. So there's always these little architectural details that peek through in the overall design. So when I designed the curtains, I want to have kind of like a dramatic swoop. So I like them to have them on holders versus like a fabric tie back. So in order to achieve that but still have like a nice clean line, actually the curtain panels are cut on a bias at the bottom. So they're like triangular shaped at the bottom. So when you kind of like fold them up, you still have a nice drape how they are on the floor. In actual fact, I had to add almost 70 cm of extra fabric on the curtains itself to create that little swoop. I think this is one of my most cohesive designs I've done. So even other places of the house that I design, I always take my family as a client. So I will always take their feedback into consideration, which means that I have to compromise some way. For this room, I really didn't care. So this is really something that I just was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And what I really liked about the whole process, like I started to design the carpets, I designed the furniture, and it was something that I could really go into my own little world of what I want to do. And even now, like when I hang up new pieces, it's just like things that I like and things that I want to showcase. So to have that kind of freedom, because we don't have that all the time, obviously, in design. So I think that was the most satisfying part of the job.